Welcome to Sustainable Packaging with Cory Connors. Today's guest is Mr. Scott Defife, who is the president of the Glass Packaging Institute and the president of the Glass Recycling Foundation. Hey, Scott, how are you?
All right, Cory, thanks. Good to be with you.
You know, I really appreciate your time, and I appreciate what glass is doing as a material for the sustainability of our packaging in the world here. Can you tell us, how did you get into the glass as a career? This is such a unique niche you found.
Yeah, well, it's actually an interesting story in the packaging world, right? So, I'm a Washington, D.C. person. I've worked on Capitol Hill. I've worked at federal government and U.S. Congress and state government level. That's my background, is policy and communication. And after I worked in Washington for a while, a natural transition for me was to the trade association arena. And so I had worked at the Restaurant Association. And in the Restaurant Association, you're exposed to a lot of, different packaging and food and beverage companies. And so I started getting into more of that supply chain work and things like that. And it led to a job where I blended my own policy and sustainability work with my work as a trade association and as a representative of industry in the trade association space, so that I could be a spokesperson for the glass industry, but also work on a lot of the problems that we face, and try to, create solutions.
It's an amazing time to be in packaging, first of all, but it's especially glass, because the popularity of glass as a sustainable option has just skyrocketed. I'm sure, and we'll talk about that later. But tell us about the Glass Packaging Institute. What does that mean? What do you do there? And then maybe the Glass Recycling Foundation as well.
Sure. So the Glass Packaging Institute is the trade association that represents the companies that make the bottles and jars primarily, right? But our entire supply chain partners. So all of the raw materials that go into making a bottle the first time. And then when you think about the glass bottles and containers that are done, then the caps, the closures, the labels, the lids, the corks, and things like that, depending upon what that end market is. But also the associated packaging and things of that nature that go along with it to move the packaging from point A to point B, but also glass recycling. So in North America, we represent not just the people who make the bottles and jars, but also the companies that do the recycling of the glass to prepare it as a raw material to go back into making new bottles and jars.
And it's such a circular material.
It is.
If handled properly and disposed of correctly.
Infinitely recyclable, no degradation in quality. If we can just get our hands on it to get it back into the system, we can keep turning that around over and over. And then you asked about the Glass Recycling Foundation. That's a newer entity, a 501c3, that the association and some of the other industries that use recycled glass. So fiberglass uses recycled glass in making fiberglass products, and then there's some other, foam aggregate and filtration material and things like that use glass, because it has, it is born from sand, silica, right? Not the same beach sand as on, the Oregon beaches or the West Coast beaches, but a silica sand. But it can serve after it's crushed up, if it's too small to be used back in a furnace, you can use it as filtration or sandblasting, or some people even add it as an additive to asphalt to create that sparkle. As you're driving along at night and the road brightens up, you can call that glass fault. There might be some glass sparkles in the asphalt to help lighten up the road and things like that.
That's a new word for me. I like that. Glass fault.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. I didn't know that was part of asphalt. What a cool story. You don't think about these raw materials being used in other things. My focus is so much on packaging that we forget about construction or road building, all those things. So that's really cool.
And it's a natural part of the recovery and processing, right? If it's going to get recycled, it's going to in that process it's broken. Right. And sometimes the particles are just too small to go back into container, but there is a useful element to that in other, some people would call it downcycling, but from the perspective of recovering and using as much of the material as you can, if
Yeah.
there's a beneficial use other than, the last place we want to see the glass is a landfill. There's
Right.
so many other things that can be done with it, especially if we can get it back. And so the foundation, I should finish that. The foundation works to help communities that need a little bit of a boost or, a grant to get going with glass recycling if they're having problems with that.
Which I'm sure is becoming more and more important as
we're getting some applications. Yes.
as demand spikes for glass packaging, the need to recycle it is more and more. That's great. So I work for Landsberg Aurora, and our parent company Aurora is the largest wine bottle manufacturer in Australia. We talked about that a little bit before the show. Do you guys correlate with each other at all, or is it kind of like a closed system?
No, I mean, there are opportunities where and especially during the pandemic times, the use of Teams and Zoom and virtual meetings has expanded our ability to get together. We do work collectively among the continental glass associations, right? And do get together all virtually right now, but there should be, hopefully, fingers crossed, at the end of the year, a meeting of the global glass associations in Dusseldorf at a typical trade show that, where everybody is attending. I should note that most recently we've all been talking because the United Nations has designated 2022 the International Year of Glass.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And yes, and so there have been more dialogue between the different European groups, the African association, the Australian and the Asian association, along with us, and all of the different parts of the glass industry. So it's not just we're glass containers.
Oh, right.
We're not windows, we're not tables or things like that. There's a different industry set that does windshields and architectural glass, and fiber optics and different elements of the glass industry have come together to work on the International Year of Glass.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about fiber optics and construction materials. Wow, it's a lot bigger than we think. We think of bottles or jars. So I live in Portland, Oregon, and I've grown up driving by the Owens, Illinois plant my whole life. And so seeing those mountains of green or mountains of brown and mountains of clear is a common sight for us. Can you talk to us about the Oregon system, which is, I think, fairly unique? I don't know how unique in the US, to be honest, which is our bottle drop system, which is a bottle to bottle recycling system. Can you walk us through that?
Sure. There's a lot of great things about the Oregon system, and often we use the Oregon model as a way to describe a best practice, right? For other states that don't have a system like that are looking at it, we say, there's a lot to learn from the Oregon system. So across the country, 10 states that are container deposit states, right? Yep. California and Oregon being two of them, and I don't want to list all of them, but you get the point.
Look at the top of your can the next time you order
the top of your can or the label on your glass bottle. You'll see the state definitions, and that in and of itself creates an incentive for the consumer to bring back the container.
Right.
Okay. And so the bottle deposit states are high volume, good quality, clean streams of material coming back for remanufacture. We also have 6 or 7 plants on the West Coast from Seattle down to Los Angeles making glass containers on the West Coast. Many of them are probably making wine bottles for the West Coast wine industry, right? And the material from the Oregon, the OBRC, and the bottle drop program, and there's a beer reuse program in there, all gets recycled back in Oregon and recovered in Oregon through those systems, and then delivered back to the Owens, Illinois factory in Portland to make new bottles. In the reuse and the refill model, you're bringing back bottles that are slightly more resilient than your typical single-use bottle. because they're designed to go back through the cleaning and washing system multiple times. The labels wash off easily, and then they get redistributed. They get sterilized and redistributed to the breweries that are a part of that program to be refilled. After you get a bottle through a refill and reuse program 2 or 3 times, all of the rest of that is bonus,
Right.
carbon savings and things of that nature. And glass is a great option for that because you don't have to worry about, any of you can put any food or beverage in a glass container and not worry about the interaction between the container and the food or beverage, which is a lot of times why you see it in used for sauces and things like that have acids and acidic content and things like that. You don't have to worry about the interaction between your packaging and your food or beverage product. But also it's resilient and it can withstand going back through the system, and the way that the bottles are designed are easily done for refill and reuse, and then cycled back through the system. There's a lot of interest across the country in going back to, this is like a return to the old,
Right.
the ways of before.
Yep.
Refill programs that have a great benefit for local economies, especially.
That seems to be the case, and it's exciting to watch what we call lovingly as the milkman system, but the packaging return or reuse system is, our ancestors, if you will, were really smart people, and that just made sense to do that. Do you think other states will take up what Oregon is doing with the bottle drop kind of program?
I think so. So there's a lot of interest right now in extended producer responsibility laws. Even Oregon passed the very first EPR, extended producer responsibility for packaging law, to augment the system that you already have in Oregon to capture that material that is not part of the bottle deposit program, right?
Right.
And so many other states are debating these concepts today. I think I've been involved in 3 different state discussions in the past 24 hours.
Wow.
Alone, let alone last week and the week before. There's a dozen or more states contemplating changing their packaging laws and contemplating these kinds of systems. All of them save a place in the language for reuse and refill.
Excellent.
And you want to, usually that starts with a local, smaller set of local companies that's doing it. It's easier at the local level to collect and then redistribute the material than to think about a national scale version of that. But they're carving out a space in all of these state laws to consider and to incentivize refill and reuse.
For so long, and that's amazing, for so long the concept was lightweight. How do we use the least amount of material to package this drink or this item? And now to go back to, okay, let's make it a little better material so we can use it for many, many times. Do you have any concept as to how many times one of those bottles could get reused?
20 to 30. There are programs where they get upwards of 50 uses. And if they're dedicated to doing the recollection well, and they're careful with the thing, I've heard of programs that get many, dozens of uses out of one before one breaks. A lot of times, Cory, they'll take a bottle out of circulation because of the aesthetics before it even breaks, right? So like if you get through 20 times, some of the ink or the stuff might, depends on the kind of different, that's more like with a milk program, because a lot of those milk bottles are, the label is almost painted on, not affixed in a paper adhesive, right? It's kind of screen print on the bottle, and that may wear off after 10 or 12 or 20 uses, and so they need to take that bottle out of the system, re-screen print it before they get it back in. But it can be dozens of times if the bottles are made the right way and you're using the right kind of collection.
That's amazing. I think Deschutes Brewing and Full Sail are two of the big brewers here in Oregon that have kind of spearheaded that system. It sounds like you kind of need one of your largest breweries to just step up and say, okay, we're in, let's do this. And then the system kind of falls into place.
It really does work as a community ground swell, kind of ground up kind of program. And then you find that collection of people who are willing to say, you know what, we'll all use the same bottle. It takes that. They have to think outside the brand, right? Because so many people, so many brand companies, and I don't blame them for this. This is part of the distinction of, marketing their brand and things like that, is sometimes the distinct nature of the shape, of the bottle or something like that is the distinguishing characteristic, but they have to kind of get in their head like, hey, it's okay if we all use the same bottle. Our labels are going to be different, and that kind of thing. They can distinguish themselves that way.
And I think the consumer of those beers generally will appreciate that they're getting recycled and or reused, particularly in this case, because especially here in Oregon, my whole life we've had a bottle bill, and that's we were the first state to do that. So we don't see bottles in ditches. We don't see them in the garbage can. They have value. We've assigned value to those. And that's such a key to this whole system of recycling. I just saw a study about states that have bottle bills recycle over 67% of their items that have value attached to them. And states that don't recycle less than 30%, which is massive. I mean, it just makes sense. Let's do this. Right.
It's and that's across all materials, right?
Yeah.
So any of the materials, you're going to get a better recycling rate in the states with bottle deposit. There are a couple states that can do it well without bottle deposit, but none of them are achieving the rates in the 60, 70, 80% range, right? Yep. And, for the listeners that are thinking about the extended producer responsibility programs, or they've heard about Canada or Europe or things like that, all of those recycling rates that are north of 65% to 75 or 80%, those are not the same waste management system that you think of in your hometown. Now, the Oregon system being, among the better ones, but across the river, just north of you in Washington, they don't have bottle deposit. They don't have EPR or anything like that. And they've been debating it this past year about going to it, but it's a completely different system. And the recovery rates are lower for all materials.
It's a financial decision, I think. And do you want to invest that money into this concept as a state? And we're just speaking about the United States of America right now. But to me, it's something we should all do. And I'm hoping extended producer responsibility makes those bottles and cans so valuable, and PET bottles as well, so valuable that states will be kind of pushed to do that. I'm hoping.
Well, it's important to get that material back for remanufacture, right? So especially for glass, 98% of glass containers are food or beverage.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah, almost all of your favorite things come in glass. In glass, whether it's beer, wine, spirits, right? Food jars. There's a small percentage of glass that is for what we would say either cosmetics or perfume or things like that. But also I throw in the vitamins and it's in the food family, right? So for glass, it's all basically food and beverage or consumables from that nature, and the quality matters because you have to have the clean material to come back in. This is true for PET as well, and to a certain extent aluminum as well. They'll all tell you that they get better quality material through programs with separate streams, or that create that incentive for the consumer to bring that back so that it's not going through the truck at the curbside and things like that. I'm not saying that doesn't provide benefit. It does. It is much more convenient for people. They can step out to their curb, but we want to do that well so that we can get that material back and have the highest best use out of it.
Absolutely. And this question isn't on my list because it just happened. Coca-Cola announced that they're going to 25% reusable packaging in the next couple of years. I think by 2025. Can glass handle that kind of demand?
Sure. I think it's important. If I read the same release
Yeah.
that you're talking about, I think that's a global number for them, right?
Yeah.
And so glass remains as, I mean, again, when I was younger, this is how the soda came, right?
Right. All
Um,
of them. Yeah.
yeah, all
In
of them.
2-liter glass bottles, right? Yeah.
Right. Even, yeah, the 12, the 16, or even the
Yeah.
bigger ones, right? And
Yep.
that's a little bit further back in my memory banks than some of the single ones. But
Yeah.
it was a system that I remember putting the bottles back into a crate, taking the crate back to the store and getting deposit back, even when I grew up in Texas.
Yep.
For that. In the southwestern part of the United States and in Mexico, glass is still the preferred packaging for Coca-Cola and soda. There's a high degree of affection, if you will,
Yes.
for glass, for
Yeah.
the beverages in glass, right? And so it can absolutely be a part of that solution for them in certain market segments, especially if there's, I think, a good a tighter circle of
Yeah.
production and cleaning and bottling, right?
Yeah.
The further that they need to get away from the source of the product to where its ultimate destination, they may choose a different, packaging material.
Right.
But for their local servicing, or in, as they start to blend in the machines and the more prevalent of the I don't want to think of it as a soda fountain,
Yeah.
right? Because it's not that old style soda fountain, but that machine that they use where you can just stick your bottle in your cup in there and order.
Yeah. And go through screens of options. What an incredible advancement from the old days where it was you have 7 choices, pretty exciting. So are consumers doing a good job of recycling glass?
Yeah, well, consumers love glass, right? And all of our data and our market analysis shows us really high degree of acceptance and understanding that glass is a highly recyclable, sustainable packaging option, right? So the biggest the number one question I get, like, across the country is, why is it different in one county to the next county to the next state and across the state lines? And hey, I used to live here, but I moved and now I can't do the same thing that I used to be able to do. And it's because in those non-deposit states, which are the majority of the country, the system is highly fragmented to local government to local government. It's even sub-regional to county. And it really depends on where the material is going to go as to how they might classify it as terms of its recyclability, things of that nature. So consumers do a good job. Sometimes in certain markets they do, even if they're told not to put the glass in this bin, but to put it over here. Mm-hmm. They still want to recycle it. They want to put it here, right? And so, but yeah, no, consumers do a good job of recycling glass, and there's a high demand. They get very upset when a community decides to take glass out of the curbside bin, right? So
I've heard that. Yes.
We love the consumers and we love the support from the community about glass recycling, and we try to encourage that. So that part's good. There are system gaps that need to be addressed that I'm not entirely sure all taxpayers understand, and that is a regional issue that involves both policy and economics as well as behavior change.
Yeah. There's a company called Recyclops. Have you heard of them?
I have heard of them. Yeah.
Yeah. I interviewed them. They were one of my first podcasts. Brian is an amazing person. He's the CEO there, and he told us about how they can set up glass recycling almost anywhere if they have enough demand. So if you're listening and you want to recycle glass and your local municipality won't take it, call Recyclops. That they're a good option until your local community will take it. So if with enough people joining forces, we can really make a difference here and get more material recycled, which it sounds like we need to keep up with demand.
We absolutely do. The industry as a whole, we just released a report last year, not just with a commitment to get to 50%, but a roadmap of how to get to 50% recycling rates for glass across the country.
Oh, wow.
Because the gaps and the needs of the system are very different in, region to region, right? So in some places there's a lot of glass, but there's not as much processing. In other parts there's, processing, but we can't get at the glass, so we're working on regional solutions to try to address the gaps in any one different place in order to boost the recycling rates and the recovery rates for glass back into the container industry so we can boost those recycled content levels.
That's excellent. What's the time frame for that? Do you have a goal?
A goal over 10 years. Largely, we were trying to match, a lot of the policy objectives that were coming out from EPA. Recently announced a 10-year, goal to get to 50% recycling rate for all materials. And so we thought we would do our part on the glass industry, not just to say, yes, we can get there, but here's how, and starting to put some financial support into pilots and replicable programs to show people how it can be done. While we try to work on the long-term solutions, there are shorter-term things that can be done to boost the glass recycling in certain areas.
That's excellent. Well, thank you for the work you're doing. And thank you for, I think glass material is beautiful and it makes for awesome packaging. So we appreciate that so much.
Well, we agree. And thank you so much.
So how do people get a hold of you guys at the Glass Packaging Institute and the Glass Recycling Foundation?
Okay. So the Glass Packaging Institute, our website, www.gpi.org. And on there, you'll see ways to communicate with us. And there's a lot of material and information on glass recycling and links to other resources. And the Glass Recycling Foundation is just that, glassrecyclingfoundation.org. And we have our own website, and you'll see some of the pilots and some of the initiatives that we've been sponsoring there. We have Facebook pages for both. And on Twitter, our GPI Twitter account is @ChooseGlass.
Oh, okay.
So give us a follow, and you'll get lots of good glass information there.
Thank you, sir. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Landsberg Aurora, for sponsoring the podcast. We really appreciate your continued support. If you're listening, please take a minute to subscribe and give us a review. We really appreciate it. And stay tuned for the next episode. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you very much.